The other big report out this hour is Okta. That stock is moving lower, about 11%, on concerns about its full-year guidance. The move comes as cybersecurity stocks soared today. The CIBR ETF hitting a record high on the back of strength of names like CrowdStrike and Fortinet. Let's get into this cyber trade with Peter Levine. He has Evercore ISI cybersecurity analyst. Peter, it strikes me that if you had sold Okta and CrowdStrike when they had trouble over the past 2 years, it would have been a mistake, probably still even after this drop in Okta after hours here. What's the lesson about the importance of security in this era with data and AI?
Sure. Thanks, John, for having me on. So I would say the secular trends powering security go unabated. So the need for security transformations to stay ahead of the threat landscape, AI more broadly, I think it's just better understood by investors today. You can't just halt security transformations, right? So I think security possesses, unique industry-specific dynamics that no other subsector of software holds. And for that, I think there's a conviction for investors to kind of pay up for growth, especially within software security.
But what about the competitive pressures? I mean, why didn't somebody else eat their lunch in these situations where they got embarrassed so badly? And what can investors learn from that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to say. I think for CrowdStrike, I think for them specific outside of Okta was its management. I think they did a pretty good job of navigating the choppy waters that they found themselves in. And I think they came out a bit stronger. They changed their go-to-market. So there's a lot they did to the customer to kind of make them happy. And then you saw the results. It's also an evolving platform. There's a lot more security products that CrowdStrike has to sell into their install base. There is a trend within CISOs, within organizations, to consolidate security spend, the tools they have, and I think CrowdStrike sits front and center. I think for Okta, that one has obviously traded at a discount to the group for obvious reasons with the misexecution, some of the go-to-market issues. But it sounds like most of that was behind us. I think the results we're seeing now, again, I think a lot of that has to do with the guide. I will have to make one correction. They did keep the full year guide flat from last quarter. It just seems like they didn't carry forward the beat, which we saw in the quarter.
Right.
But for Okta specifically, it was, they've had their issues, which it seems like they've overcome.
Yeah, it seems like expectations were for that guide to be higher for the full year based on the expectations for the quarter. So what are the questions that you would have about that then? Is this just garden variety caution based on the macro environment? It seems like some other companies are indeed upping their guides, in tech at least. Does this cast a pall of any sort over the cybersecurity trade or no?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we've heard from other security companies where, the month of April was a bit not challenging, but they saw a couple of days where, sales cycles were elongated. There was some hesitation, but it seems like most of that went away. For Okta, we want to hear are they just de-risking the guide? Are they just, kind of using the market as an opportunity just to kind of, keep guide flat and then hopefully create a beat and race scenario throughout the next 3 quarters? For them, it's just kind of understanding the upsell motion of their platform. They're the only vendor that has the 3 core products of identity. And if you think about AI, that becomes a huge upsell opportunity around the number of non-human, identities, the AI workflows, the bots, the co-pilots. Those all need to be provisioned with security, and access controls, which is identity, is top of mind for most CISOs. So there's definitely the demand is here. I'd just love to hear what they saw in macro, if it was any different from what we heard from Palo Alto, Checkpoint, or even Fortinet.
Right, and we've got CrowdStrike and Rubrik coming up soon. Do you see at all the geopolitical shifts changing the competitive landscape for these companies?
I know there's a congressional hearing tomorrow. I don't think so. I don't think threats don't slow down in a recession. Hackers, especially state-sponsored groups, they operate regardless of any economic cycle. So I think CISOs, even boards, are taking security a lot more serious. You saw what happened with Coinbase and the cyber issue they went into, and obviously the impact. So you have threat landscape is not going to change because we're in a recession. You have regulatory mandates, which are actually forcing companies to spend more. So there's a lot of secular trends here that I think should power the demand for security. Specifically, I think identity stands to benefit the most with the rise of AI.
All right, Peter Levine, thank you.